Hey everyone, and welcome to this first inaugural edition of the Into the Rift podcast, hosted by myself, Alexander Coccia, and my good friend Joe Curley. You might recognize us from a couple different card games in the past, but we are here to talk Riftbound. Joe, how are you today, my man? It's great to see you, and it's great to finally launch this podcast we've been talking about for so long.
Yeah, so excited. I know that we are both big Riftbound fans, and to be able to come here every week and talk to you about Riftbound is something I'm really excited for. And today's episode particularly, I'm excited because I've been cooking up all sorts of decks, Alex, which I can't wait to share with everybody.
Yeah, so today it's basically an introduction to what the Into the Rift podcast is meant to be. We're going to be talking about both, first off, like ourselves and what got us into card games and specifically what got us into Riftbound. We're then going to be discussing the best budget decks you can be playing right now, designed by Joe himself. And so we're going to be talking about what those decks are designed to do, the cards within them, and perhaps some sideboard kind of upgrades you can make as you build your collection in Riftbound. So why don't we get started actually, okay? And as you mentioned, we plan on doing this once per week, so stay tuned. And if you're not subscribed, be sure to subscribe because we will be releasing weekly content. And if you are new here, might I suggest you kind of share the podcast with your friends that are in the Riftbound space, because that would mean the world to us as we get started on this brand new adventure, episode 1, Joe. And we are here with Meet Joe. That's our first topic of conversation. And so, Joe, I want to give you an opportunity to kind of introduce yourself to the audience here, kind of talk about not only what got you into Riftbound in the first place, but most importantly, what you've been playing in the past and kind of what got you to this point today.
Sure, yeah. So I've been playing Riftbound since the cards got announced over in China. Like I played quite a lot of games on Tabletop Simulator. There was like some tournaments happening. So I actually was playing a lot quite early on. Was very interested in Riftbound because I've been playing lots of physical card games recently, particularly Disney Lorcana is what I'm most known for. And I really enjoyed Legends of Runeterra. I loved Arcane, even though I was never much of a League player. But the IP of Riftbound and League of Legends is definitely something interesting. I printed off a bunch of proxy cards. I taught many of my friends how to play, and I've been really enjoying Riftbound. Particularly, actually, 4-player Riftbound is my favorite way to play. Of course, the focus of this episode is going to be on 1 versus 1 because I think that's how most people play. But this 4-player Riftbound is so fun, and if you haven't tried it yet, I really encourage everyone to give it a go.
The first time I ever played Riftbound was actually at PAX West in Seattle. I had the opportunity to kind of get into a private pod with some of the game designers and stuff like that, and they kind of taught myself and a couple other content creators in the space how to play, and they actually taught us the FFA kind of 2v2 type setup. It was so fun. The idea that there's multiple formats here, I think, gives this game like new life in a way where even if you don't love the one-on-one style play, which you're kind of crazy if you don't, because I think the one-on-one's actually super fun too. There are so many different variations already designed, and I'm sure they have some plans up their sleeves as well. So for me, it really stood out how fun the multiplayer iterations of Riftbound were. And I just want to go back to something here, because you and I actually had the opportunity to meet in New York City for a Marvel Snap tournament. That's actually kind of like one of the things that we hold together here. Now, I actually used to watch your Gwent content back in the day. This is when you first started making content, and then you and I kind of emerged on the Marvel Snap scene together. And that culminated in us getting an opportunity to compete in one of the absolute first in-person Marvel Snap tournaments in New York City, where you and I got to meet and hang out. And it's kind of funny to think that years later, here we are starting a brand new venture together in a game called Riftbound.
Yeah, absolutely. That trip to America was my first ever time as well, actually, over in North America. And I've since been back playing some physical card game tournaments. Of course, this weekend there's that big event over in North America, and I'm itching myself to try and get down to a Riftbound event in America soon. It's certainly very, very cool to be doing this podcast with you, Alex. You're someone who I've really enjoyed watching your content, and love that you're getting into Riftbound.
Oh, I can't help it. I mean, I fell in love with this game, and it's one of those things where I make content, and I try to make content about things I'm passionate about. I used to be a mobile player. I was going to say Dota 2, but I don't want to immediately upset everyone on this podcast here. Although with playing Riftbound, I literally want to play League of Legends so bad. Now I'm starting to learn about these characters and stuff like that, and I really want to get into it. And that actually should be something that is kind of note here. The idea that I think that Riftbound is obviously going to appease players who understand the IP, have been playing League of Legends for years. It's one of the most popular games on the planet. It has been for over a decade. But it has the power to actually not only bring mobile players into the card gaming space, but people who might not even be necessarily familiar with the IP altogether, and bring them into the space, which is exactly what it did to me. I have Magic decks all around me. I have so many card games I play on a constant basis. And for some reason, right, there's a reason why I don't have a Magic podcast. And there's a reason why I'm starting a Riftbound podcast. It's because this has stuck with me in a way that other card games simply have not. I am so unbelievably impressed with how Riftbound has played and how well they've taken this IP to craft not only memorable characters that have very interesting effects, but legitimate fun ways of like manipulating the game state. Like this has a fantastic array of mechanics, and like for instance the ganking mechanic, I think it's incredibly well designed, because ganking in MOBAs, right, we all know what that is. But like long story short, incorporating that into a card game where you're kind of moving from battlefield to battlefield is ingenious. It essentially took the League IP and it made maximum use of it in a paper card game format. And so I got sucked in completely into Riftbound, and I just can't wait for the future of this game. Like when the sets were being announced, I was literally at PAX Unplugged. I was sitting front row. I was with a whole bunch of MTG Pro Tour players. We were taking a look at the screen. Everyone was going nuts. It was just such an unbelievable experience. And I know for a fact that this game has a long, prosperous life ahead of it. They literally announced 3-4 sets. It's crazy.
Yeah, they announced so much. And just everything they've done really from start to finish in terms of communication has been brilliant. Like there's definitely been some hiccups along the way, like a lot of cards being errated, for example. Some of the printing of cards like being rough around the edges, which is, you know, quite symbolic for Riftbound as a whole, because I think it's a game that wasn't even originally supposed to release in English-speaking countries, but they decided, okay, this game, we've got something good. And it's been just so amazing how quickly they've gone from idea to full release. And I think that the game is just going to keep going from strength to strength from here. Like I love the card design. I love the fact that the game feels so good for multiplayer. I think that the systems are so unique as well. Like a lot of card games feel very similar, let's say, to Magic the Gathering, which is of course like the godfather of card games. And while Riftbound takes some things from Magic, it plays in a very, very different way. The battlefield and point scoring system, I think the first time I played it, I was a little bit unconvinced actually by the flow of the gameplay, because it's something that's so different. But I actually think that's to Riftbound's credit. It feels very, very different and unique. And you have a lot of game states which you're just not used to seeing in other card games as a result.
Yeah, no, the play is extremely engaging. It's incredibly engaging. And I think that's one of the superpowers this game has. And it feels like at any point in time, if you're not feeling a particular, legend champion combination, you could literally change the champion, or you can change colors. You can do so many different things to kind of revitalize the play. It almost feels like a legitimately endless game, where, we have so many opportunities to not only deck build, but refine those decks and even find the ones that we truly love, right? Like for me, I kind of brought it up on the screen earlier, but for me, like Teemo has been absolutely incredible. Like this has been what I've absolutely loved to play. And I've been playing so much Teemo lately. And we actually have kind of the Summoner Skirmish coming up in my locals here. It's going to be like a 36-person event or something like that. And so I've been refining my strategies, getting those mundos nice and big, riding the wind all over the place here and there, getting those dubs. And it's been a lot of fun. And I can't wait to try some other things as well. But for me, it's been all about mastering a particular style of play, mastering a deck, mastering a legend. And then once I feel like I've gotten to the point where I can be competitive there, I want to start experimenting with others as well. And it's kind of funny because I started with Teemo because I actually pulled a overnumbered rare, right? And I was like, oh, this is sick. It was like one of my first 2 packs I opened. I'm like, well, I guess I'm going to try to build this deck. That's like the thing that inspired me. And then like a week or 2 later, it kind of started getting popular from a meta perspective, which I thought was particularly fascinating. One thing I should mention is that, for those that may not be too familiar with myself, hi, I'm Alex. Welcome to the Into the Rift podcast. I should mention that I'm most known for my Marvel Snap content, as Joe had mentioned. One of the things I've been doing has been the Marvel Snapchat podcast alongside Cozy Snap, otherwise known as Cozy Rivals. And we have had the top Marvel Snap podcast for several years. And for me, it's only natural that I take my love for Riftbound and create a podcast with someone who I absolutely respect in Joe Curley here. And by the way, I should mention, if Joe looks familiar and you can't quite figure out, like, what? I don't remember his name being Joe Curley. Might the name Specimen come ring a bell, right? Because, you changed your name a couple times because it was Specimen, then it was Specimen Curley, right? You've changed it a few times, and now we're settling on Joe
Identity
Curley.
crisis.
Yeah.
Well, that's my government name, so, you can't go too wrong with that, right? But yeah, I was going by Specimen or Speci. I did Gwent content, Gwent the Witcher card game, which was my first love. Quite a similar era of games to Legends of Runeterra, really, which unfortunately not getting support anymore, but you can still play Gwent and it's still a great game. So I was part of the broadcast teams for their competitive circuits. I was involved helping a lot of players create decks for some world championships. That's always been my big passion. Then I did Marvel Snap. And then after Marvel Snap, Disney Lorcana is now the game I've been creating content for predominantly. And I'm also a broadcaster for the official Disney Lorcana Challenge events in Europe, which is really fun. I get to compete sometimes as well, which I love, like card game tournaments, physical card games. My favorite thing is like going to these events, meeting so many awesome people. And I'm very, very excited for the event in Bologna, which got announced, the first big European event for Riftbound. You'll certainly see me there.
I actually competed in the DLC Toronto for Disney Lorcana, and it was funny because friend of the show and friend of ours, Kawa, was came to compete in the Toronto event. I'm Canadian. I'm from the Toronto area, and it's funny because I didn't even have a deck. I couldn't even quite remember the rules. And he's like, Moyen made this deck. It's really good. And he handed me like this Tamatoa item deck. And he's like, just pilot this. You'll be fine. I didn't even know what like other people were doing. I just was doing my thing. I almost cracked the top 50%, which was kind of fun. But it was a really fun experience. I think Lorcana is actually a really fun game. But I don't know, man. Riftbound has got me pulled right in. And on that note, maybe we should discuss what we've been playing this past week, because we've been playing a lot of stuff at locals, and kind of I know you've been streaming a whole ton, playing a bunch with your girlfriend. And for me, as I mentioned, it's been all Teemo all the time. I absolutely loved Teemo. The play style of the manipulative board states and the hidden cards and the constant draw is really cool. I've been trying to figure out how I want to build them, because like I've been trying to do things like, I actually ended up pulling a Time Warp, but I'm not absolutely convinced that I want to play Time Warp. But one of the cards that I've been really enjoying has been Sneaky Deckhand. I think this is a card that I'm not seeing in a lot of Teemo decks. But what you're able to do is on your first turn, if you're going second, right? If you're on the kind of the draw step there, you're able to play this out and immediately take a battlefield. Conversely, on the next turn, you can also take a battlefield and immediately hide your Teemo, or hide something into that location, which I think is super beneficial. Gaining a board presence and immediately taking advantage of it is exactly what Teemo players want to do. And so I think Sneaky Deckhand has low-key been one of my favorite cards in the deck that I'm not seeing teched into a lot. But overall, I've been experimenting with so many different variations of the deck, and obviously, low-key winners have been stuff like Ride the Wind, which is incredibly important with Mundo. And I should mention also, we have probably people who are relatively new to the podcast who are kind of listening here. And Ride the Wind, we do have all the text here up on the screen, but Ride the Wind does allow you to move a friendly unit and ready it for 2 mana and 1 power. It's an incredibly powerful utility that allows you to take advantage of a massive Mundo. And also, at the end of the day, something like a stack deck, which I think might be one of the absolute best cards in the game.
I think it's the best.
Is it? It's easy to call it the best card?
I think it might be the best. Yeah, I mean, I tend to have a bad habit of calling many different cards the best card in the game. But if you had to just narrow it down to one card, I think this is it. There's not that many cards that do a similar thing, like just that consistency. And the fact that you're then putting 3 cards down onto the bottom of your deck, not only does it help you find a good card for that moment, but it helps you dig further towards your other cards, right? Like in a Teemo deck, you really need that Dr. Mundo, but if you don't have stacked deck, if your 3 Dr. Mundos are all in like the bottom half of your deck, you might never find them, and actually even just cycling through your deck helps a lot. So I would have to say it's probably the best card in the game.
That's right. So for 1 energy, you look at the top 3 cards of your main deck, put 1 into your hand, and recycle the rest. And I should say that we have been mentioning Dr. Mundo a couple times here. He's kind of the linchpin keystone card that makes this archetype tick. He is a 8 energy, 2 power card for 6 might, and he reads, "My might is increased by the number of cards in your trash, and at the start of the beginning phase, cycle 3 from your trash." What's interesting about this is you want to build his power by using as many cards as possible. You want to build up your trash, and he actually kind of ticks down in power as you recycle in. However, as you use cards, he kind of ticks back up. His power is constantly shifting, which I find particularly fascinating. But for me, he's regularly like 15 to 20 power by the time he comes out, and you ride the wind and you move him around and you're able to kind of bring him back to base at times, right? So very interesting what this card can do, and for me, he has been absolutely fantastic. Some decks run 2, I run 3. I think it's absolutely worth running 3. He feels like the win condition for that particular deck, and anytime you have a win condition, you probably want 3 of them, and that's exactly what I've done with Dr. Mundo.
It's interesting, Alex, because I played Teemo all the time before the game was out in, well, I'm living in Germany now, but out in English-speaking countries. I was playing Teemo. I wasn't playing Dr. Mundo, and the Kaiser matchup was the big problem for the deck. I had great matchups across the board, but I just couldn't get that Kaiser matchup down. And that's like one thing that Dr. Mundo does so well is we know that Kaiser is one of, if not the best decks in the game, but it has one big weakness, which is that it can't deal with big chunky units. And Dr. Mundo is the chunkiest unit of them all.
Yeah, and it's funny because, like, you know, matchup wise, like, I'm still trying to get a handle on like which matchups are the most favorable for Teemo and others. And that's one of the beneficial parts of focusing on one particular deck you're trying to play competitively, because you start to learn those matchups and the intricacies of it. For the first time in my Riftbound career, I actually 8-0'd a Master Yi player, which I thought was pretty cool. And I was like, well, I've never won a complete shutout victory before, but it's kind of interesting to see how these matchups evolve over time, especially when people have sideboards. If you're playing more competitively, I happen to be playing kind of like, you know, 1 in, 1 out, one-on-ones, right, where you're not actually using the sideboard very often. But next week I'm in a summoner skirmish, so there will be best of 3s. So the sideboard is going to be increasingly important. So anyways, I've been playing lots of Teemo. I'm going to pass it on to you, Joe. What have you been playing?
Yeah, I mean, Teemo was the first deck I played a lot of. I liked a lot of Jinx. But this week, in particular, I have been really trying to focus in playing some budget decks. Because obviously we know with Riftbound, there are a lot of great decks, but many of these decks have very expensive cards in because there's obviously not a ton of product. So what I wanted to try and do is build what are the best decks you can play on a budget, like under $100, that kind of ballpark. And what I've managed to do is I've managed to get a deck from every single color, which I think is quite cool. We've got some upgrades on each of the starter decks as well. And I think within here, there are decks which are good enough to win big events, for sure. I'm very, very proud of them. People that know my content from other card games, deck building is kind of the biggest strength of my card game play. Like, I like to compete. I have pretty good results at tournaments, but it's always the deck building that I've been more passionate about. And Riftbound deck building, Alex, is actually my favorite thing. Like, I think a 40-card deck with a legend, a chosen champion, and an 8-card sideboard, but the playset of 3, it just feels so tight and so rewarding. Like, every single card you put in these decks has a big impact. And I just love the deck building in this game. This is the first set, but it's already extremely difficult to optimize lists. And also the battlefields and how that it can impact your deck building. I mean, the battlefields remind me a little bit of Marvel Snap, and takes my favorite thing from Marvel Snap. And it just adds so much fun to not only the gameplay, but also the deck building.
Absolutely. And so we do have 5 budget decks, and this is going to be the main topic of conversation today. And these are all designed by Joe. So I'll give you the opportunity to go through them and kind of what you think and kind of the basis for them. A couple things worth noting. We're still kind of ironing out some of the layout stuff. So just a couple things. We might try to kind of zoom in more in the future, but if you're on YouTube, you can actually pinch zoom into the video player if you want to read a particular card. But we're going to try our best when discussing particular cards to read out their effects and text in order for you to kind of follow along if you're listening, kind of like driving home or something like that, because we know that this is a podcast. You might not be staring at the screen. And we're also all of us are relatively new to Riftbound, considering the game has only been launched within the last month. So anyways, Joe, take it away. Talk us through the first budget deck.
Yeah, so a lot of the budget decks that we're going to be sharing with you might just be like slightly worse versions of the main deck, right? And we'll talk about those kinds of cards that you could include. For example, there's like an Annie deck that we're going to look at, which if you have some Kaisers, you probably want to slot them in. But this deck is quite unique because this is actually the optimized list. This is not missing any card. Everything in this deck is affordable, and it's extremely cheap. So it's a Yasuo deck, which is a legend, whose name I am butchering quite often. So if I'm still getting it wrong, let me know in the comments. But I think I've got the hang of it. But while a lot of people are going to call it a Yasuo deck, I would actually say that this is a Kayn deck. Of course, Kayn is a champion unit. It doesn't have a legend. But Kayn is this 6 energy and 1 power card with 6 might. It has ganking, which from what I gather might be Alex's favorite keyword. And the card text is extremely strong. If I have moved twice this turn, I don't take damage. So this combines very nicely with the Yasuo legend ability, which is that you can pay 2 energy and move a friendly unit to or from your base. So essentially with this deck, your big objective is on your 3rd turn, when you're at 6 runes or above, you want to just play Kayn down into your base. And then the following turn, you're going to use 2 energy to move Kayn into a battlefield with Yasuo. And then you're going to, if you win that combat, he's then going to be, with his ganking, able to move into the other battlefield. And you can completely dominate both battlefields, particularly with the combat tricks that you have available in green with On Guard. This can give your Kayn +2 might for just 1 energy. Discipline can give your Kayn another +2 might for just 2 energy, and it draws a card. And overall, the deck just feels great if you can get Kayn down nice and early.
There's no question that this is a very effective deck, and it has one of my favorite cards in it in Nocturne. Yes. Which when you look at cards at the top of your deck, if you see them, you can play it for power, which is kind of fascinating, right? And you're doing that, obviously, with the stacked deck. I like the tech you've included here. There's also a couple things you can do to sub stuff in as well. Like if you're short a couple cards here with the Traveling Merchant, who basically discards a card when it moves to draw one, you could consider putting something like a Scrap Heap in there, right?
Yeah.
Now,
definitely.
I've been doing Scrap Heap stuff with the Traveling Merchant, and sometimes it's a little sus, but when it hits, man, it hits. Drawing 2 is an absolutely fantastic feeling for what in some ways should be kind of like a something when you're discarding and you should be kind of giving something up, but you're just cashing in completely. So if you are missing a couple cards here, you could consider doing something like that.
One thing that's really important if you do play Scrap Heap is to play the Zorn Warren's Battlefield, because essentially what you would do is on game 1, you'd play Zorn Warrens with your Scrap Heaps in your deck, and then you've got that extra little bit of discard. Zorn Warrens is when you conquer here, discard a card, draw a card. And that's something that we actually see in a lot of decks. This deck has a similar concept with the Nocturne, that you can combine the Candlelit Sanctum on your first game with Nocturne. And then if you don't want the Nocturne in your deck for game 2 and 3, you can sideboard it out. So Nocturne, great with Candlelit Sanctum, a little bit dodgy elsewhere. And you can very much do something similar with Scrap Heap and the Zorn Warrens. And that's just a really good combo that you could actually put into any deck pretty much. If you're short on a few cards and you're like, well, I just need like a little bit of extra cards to make up the space for those expensive slots, Scrap Heap is a really good way of doing that.
I love that you mentioned that, because when I was at Locals and we finished our games kind of early, I was just kind of chatting with a couple friends there. And one of the things that kind of came up was that it seemed as though a lot of people were kind of treating battlefields as like this tertiary consideration. Everyone wants to build like the meta deck, and they want to make the deck that the pros are playing and that are performing well at major events and stuff like that. But not a lot of thought is being given into the actual battlefields sometimes. And I love that you bring that up, that sometimes battlefields can be super beneficial. Like the Teemo, I can't remember the exact name of it, but the one that allows you to hide an additional card is amazing. It's for a Teemo player. Yeah, Bandle Tree, right? So those are phenomenal considerations. And when you consider if you're playing a best of 3 and you have access to that sideboard, I love what you're saying with Nocturne, how you can consider switching it out. That's an absolutely fantastic call. I like that a lot. Another shout out I want to make here is the Wielder of Water, who I think is an absolutely phenomenal card. Considering it's a common card, that is something that I think pays a lot of dividends in a lot of situations there. Obviously played in like other decks as well. You see it very often. It's one of the more popular of the common green cards, but I like to see it being played here as well. One of the ones I have a question for you though here is, so Defy tends to be particularly expensive at times, but incredibly impactful. What is your decision making around including Defy here, and kind of like what are some of the key targets you kind of want to, Defy, I guess?
Yeah, good question. I think that Defy is a card, I mean, looking at this list, if anything, it's one of the cards you could reduce the copies of down. Like, for example, you could maybe go for 2 Defies and 2 Charms. But I think Defy is always a card you want to have on your sideboard. The main reason is against like Annie, for example, if they use Fight or Flight onto your Kayn, like you lose so much tempo, you really need your Kayn to come through and be a big powerhouse. It's really just in those moments where you build up this Kayn onto your board, it's quite slow, right? Like on your 3rd turn, you play a 6 Might Guide to your base. And then if you move into a battlefield and your opponent's able to do some cheeky combat tricks and your Kayn dies before it moves twice, you probably lose the game. So it's in there just as an extra combat trick, really. And it's also just a very cheap card. I think if ever you're looking to build a cheap deck, green has a lot of these combat tricks that are very cheap. Defy, On Guard, and Discipline, but then also Charm, which isn't exactly a combat trick, but you can start a combat with it on an unsuspecting opponent. So I think that Charm is maybe the one card in this list that I would look to play more. That's why there's 2 copies of it in the sideboard. I just wanted to quickly touch on the battlefields again, Alex, because you mentioned it. I think one thing that's really an important concept to have when playing Riftbound and building decks is how these battlefields fit into your deck building decisions and also your sideboard decisions. Usually in Riftbound, you're going to have one battlefield, which is a designated battlefield that you're going to play when you know that you're going first. So in the first game of a best of 3, you don't know if you're going first or second. So you're going to pick what I would call like a neutral battlefield. So in this deck, it would be the Candlelit Sanctum. It's pretty good if I go first. It's pretty good if I go second. And I think that it's going to give me a little bit more benefit than my opponent, particularly because I'm playing Nocturne. That's sort of why it's in there. But then those other 2 battlefields, the Arena's Greatest, I'm only going to play this battlefield when I know I'm going first. Gives me a little bit of extra tempo. And then the Obelisk of Power is the battlefield I decided on this one when I know I'm going second. And the logic of this one, each player gets an extra rune. What's quite interesting about that is usually I play Kayn on turn 3, but that 1 extra rune means that on my second turn, instead of being at 5 runes, I'm at 6 runes, and that allows me to get that Kayn down a little bit sooner. And sort of, obviously when you're going second, you need to catch up in tempo a bit. So it's a really, really important thing to consider in Riftbound. You usually want 1 neutral battlefield that you play every time when going first, 1 battlefield which really doubles down on taking that first place advantage, the Arena's Greatest, and the I think it's called like the Willow Tree, which is like when you hold here, draw 1, and then 1 battlefield which is pretty good going second. Like some of the best decks in the game will always be using a battlefield which really takes advantage of going first.
Yeah, that's awesome. And as we've said like a couple times now, right, the battlefield consideration is super important, especially if you're looking to be competitive. It's one of the ways you can definitely min-max your performance. Moving onward, we have a couple different decks. We have 5 in total, actually. And we do have Budget Lee Sin here. And, Lee Sin, one of the starter deck heroes that you're able to kind of pick up on. And we have a deck here from Joe Curley, and I'll give you a chance to kind of go through it. And I can already see I love it. We were talking about Charm before, and we have Challenge here. So they often occupy very similar spaces. So what are your thoughts around this Budget Lee Sin deck?
Yeah, so Lee Sin, it was actually the starter deck that I had at the sort of pre-release equivalent event that we had here in Berlin. And I was very pleasantly surprised by the quality of the starter deck. I actually think that it's the strongest starter deck in a vacuum. Of course, the other 2 being Viktor and Jinx. Maybe Viktor a little bit more powerful when it's fully upgraded, and we'll take a look at a budget version of Viktor soon. But the Lee Sin starter deck just had so many good cards in it. And I have to say, I was pretty impressed in my testing with this deck. Of course, if you've got Master Yi, which is a Proving Grounds legend, you could actually play a very similar style of budget deck with Master Yi. But I genuinely believe that Lee Sin is a better bet for this style of deck. Master Yi is very, very good when you're ramping, but Lee Sin is just a very solid legend. Like the legend ability, paying 1 to buff a unit, it isn't spectacular, but it's decent. And the legend that you get is also very good. But moreover, the quality of cards here is just very, very good. One thing that you're struggling for when you're playing a budget deck is what is your win condition. You can't play Thousand-Tailed Watcher, you can't play Dazzling Aurora, you can't play Time Warp. So what is a win condition for a budget deck? And usually it's going to be something that's quite tempo orientated and quite quick. And this deck just has a lot of very strong cards like First Mate, one of my favorite cards in the game. It's a 3-cost, 3 might. When you play this character or when you play this unit, ready another unit. That just allows you to move from battlefield to battlefield and get up some points very quickly. And then this Carnivorous Snapvine is just such a good way of gaining tempo in the mid game. And really this plays like an aggro deck. It's slightly more mid-range, but you're trying to win quite quickly. And I think that's what you need to do when you're on a budget. You don't want to be trying to go toe-to-toe with Dazzling Aurora and Thousand-Tailed Watchers. You need to probably be a little bit quicker than those decks.
I like that. I like what you said there. The idea of kind of being more aggro and not allow the more refined, expensive decks, so to speak, to kind of get their legs under them and start running away with the game, which is exactly what Dazzling Aurora will do. Like if you just let that thing sit there and start pulling cards, like you're cooked, right? Like you gotta be on the field to play earlier and get an advantage nice and quickly. And one of the things that definitely does that is, as you said, the First Mate, who is one of my favorite cards that I had a chance to play in a bunch of sealed events. And for me, I was able to do a lot of things like manipulating the board state, kind of readying, moving things around. And I thought that was particularly valuable. Now, in this deck here, you do have the signature spell, right? You have the signature spell, Dragon's Rage. Do you kind of want to talk us through your thoughts around using that in this particular deck and kind of like what your what your idea is behind that?
Well, to be honest, Alex, it's because I had 1 copy of Dragon's Rage in my binder. And I looked at the card and I thought it looked unbelievable. So this is definitely not a card you have to play. It's possible you might even want to play 2. I would say it's kind of the only card in the deck which is particularly expensive. Like usually the signature spells are, but it's less than $10 per card. It's not a particularly popular one, but it's very, very powerful. So it's basically you can take out 2 of your opponent's cards at once. So you move an enemy unit to a different place, and then that unit and another unit at that location, whether it's the base at a battlefield, deal their might damage to each other. So against my girlfriend yesterday, she had a Nocturne and a Noxus Hopeful, both at 4 might in different battlefields. I moved one into the other and I took them both out. It's like a very nice tempo swing. It's kind of similar to the Carnivorous Snapvine and Challenge. Like all of these cards give you a nice little bit of control and a big tempo swing to really start taking over the game. What for you is in the later stages, but for your opponent is still very much in the mid game. They're still like getting set up. And I think that in Riftbound, if you can really take advantage of tempo, like just one big play like that, where you take out one of your opponent's characters and yours survives. That's what the Snapvine does very well, is a great way to win quite quickly.
I like how you design this deck as well, where, you have the 8 body runes. Like it's actually very notable. You're going 8 to 4 here, which is, a little less common. Most people just do the 6-6 split here, and you're kind of more leaning into the body side, which is awesome. And it looks like you're leaning into, okay, we gotta put the power on the board. We gotta make effective trades, but also the combat tricks available with the Defies, the On Guards, and the Charms and stuff like that, which I think are particularly awesome at trying to eke out small advantages and then snowball that throughout the course of a given game with a budget Lee Sin deck. Did you want to give us a breakdown of your decision-making around the battlefields?
Yeah, sure. So you've got the Monastery. This is like your go-to. This is just a very good battlefield for Lee Sin. So it's one of the weaknesses maybe of this color combination is there's not an abundance of card draw, but this battlefield is just giving you so much juice in game 1, which is when you conquer here, you may spend a buff to draw 1. You have so many buffs, your opponent probably doesn't have any, and if they do, they're probably a little bit more hard to come by. So the Cytherea of Cloudfield in here, I would probably be sideboarding out after game 1, but she is particularly good with this battlefield. I'm always quite heavy on my 2 drops, Alex. I hate missing my first turn in Riftbound, but particularly with this style of deck, like a lot of the budget decks are quite quick. I think that you really want to be making sure you find that curve. Then we've got the Arena's Greatest. Again, it's just my sort of favorite battlefield in the game when I'm going first. You could go for the when you hold here, draw one. That's actually in the Lee Sin starter deck. But I didn't feel too confident holding the battlefield. I don't have an abundance of stats. But because my deck's quite quick, Arena's Greatest, I think, is just always going to be solid. And then Obelisk of Power was one I tested a little bit. It's not as good in this deck as it is in the Yasuo deck. I think it's more important there. So you could definitely try something else. But I just felt like I was always quite short on runes. Having that extra rune just felt quite nice in the end. But I have to say, Alex, the card I want to give the shout out to, my MVP, because it was my MVP in the starter deck tournament I played in when I went undefeated. It's this Wild Claw Shaman. It's not a card I've seen anybody play, but I was so amazed by it in my starter deck. When you play me, you may spend a buff to buff me and ready me. So it's 4 energy, 3 might. You take a buff from one of your other cards and put the buff onto this. So you've got a 4 energy card, which comes in ready at 4 might. Usually for that kind of power, you're going to be paying a power cost. You're going to have to recycle a rune. So it's a very unique card, which you can't really play in many decks. But again, with a sort of an aggro style, trying to win quite quickly deck, this card just felt so brilliant to me.
You know what? It's funny you mentioned that because I played that exact card as well when I was playing Sealed. And the rules around Sealed are a little different. You're doing these 25 card decks, 3 colors, stuff like that. And sometimes you got to play with stuff that you think is suboptimal. Like you don't have a constructed deck when you're playing Sealed. And this was one of the cards I had in my list. And sure enough, you're right. It felt like energy cheat half the time. It felt like power cheat where I was able to kind of ready it up and put it to work. So I really like that call out. And you mentioned not having a lot of draw. And that's why I love to see 3 disciplines here. Discipline, I think, is a tremendously powerful card. Not only does it give you that draw, you're also providing, that buff to yourself there, which I think is going to help you trade locations, right? So long story short, really like the design of this particular deck. It's one that I think that you can definitely take into your locals and do some damage with.
I'm torn between this, Alex, or the Yasuo deck for my tournament on Saturday, because my girlfriend's shotgunned the Annie deck. Just worth mentioning the sideboard with this one as well. This isn't a refined sideboard. I just wanted to try and put in a lot of cards to give everybody some ideas of the sort of cards that you might want to experiment with. I think the Orange Seal, it's a very expensive card, but if you have access to it, I could see a world where playing like 1 or 2 of those could be good. So yeah, there's a few different options in there. None of these cards are particularly expensive, but maybe the Seal is the one expensive card I would want to play test.
Yeah, and one of the challenges, of course, with any card game is that everyone's collection is a little different. So these decks are more or less baselines that you can use to help you kind of get ideas of how you can kind of approach your deck building. But if you crack a pack and you get a seal and you want to use it, use it. You know what I mean? Like actually use the cards you crack and have some fun with them, because that at the end of the day is what it's all about. Now you did mention Annie, and that's what we're moving on to next. We have an Annie budget deck, and this is a very fascinating deck. Now Annie comes from the Proving Grounds. And so, and for that reason, alongside Master Yi, the Proving Grounds, which was supposed to be a relatively inexpensive entry point into Riftbound, has become a much more expensive entry point into Riftbound. But the team is aware of it, and I believe they intend on kind of incorporating some of the those cards that are stuck behind Proving Grounds into the kind of the packs. I can't remember what they're called. The promotional packs they're giving at locals and stuff like that. The Nexus Knights packs, right? Which I think are in incredibly short supply. Like I know that my LGS does not readily have a supply of them. So they often only give them to like top 6 and stuff like that because they just do not have enough of them, which is a little unfortunate. I mean, the lack of product has been a very consistent force in the launch of Riftbound, but that's been pretty consistent across many different card games, their first sets, right? But anyways, I was going to say Speci, but Joe, do you want to walk us through your Annie budget deck?
Yeah, sure. And worth mentioning, if you don't have Annie, you can still play this color combination. We're going to take a look at a very different Jinx deck, but you could also build Jinx with pretty much exactly the same cards. Annie is going to be a little bit better with that, and we are going to take a look at a very different Jinx deck, But if you don't have Annie, you only have Jinx, you can definitely like give this version of the deck a go with just Jinx slotted in instead. So Alex, you mentioned Sneaky Deckhand being a card you love in Teemo. I am the same. I played Sneaky Deckhand in Teemo a lot. But now that I have seen the power of the Sneaky Deckhand in an Annie deck, I am just blown away. So imagine, right, in every other deck you go second, you play a Sneaky Deckhand on your first turn. It's great, but you've got no runes left, right? Your opponent is suddenly like, oh, maybe I can take out that Sneaky Deckhand and gain a huge tempo swing at the start of the game. Well, suddenly with Annie, you ready 2 runes after you play your Sneaky Deckhand. That's the legend ability. And you can defend this Annie with gusts, with fight or flights, with ride the winds, with all sorts. And it is just devastating. Particularly, I want to mention, I have the Nocturne on the sideboard and I have Scrap Heap in the main deck for this. I will do differently. I think that the general consensus is that Scrap Heap and Zorn Warrens is a great combo for this deck. Many of the Annie decks which finish like top 4 at big events were doing this. Nocturne's my favorite card in the game, and I will be playing, if I get the chance to play, if I can convince my girlfriend to let me play it 1 week, that is, which is easier said than done, I'll be playing Nocturne in this with the Candlelit. Because you can go Sneaky Deckhand on your very first turn into Candlelit Sanctum. Imagine then you see Nocturne in the top 2 cards. Suddenly you've got 6 Might at a battlefield, and then you're readying 2 runes. You can play stacked decks in your opponent's turn if they start a showdown to find another Nocturne. Like, you can just get off to so much quick point gaining with this deck. And the big way to win the game with this one is going to be with Vi, which works in a similar way to Dr. Mundo. Instead of just gaining the points like Dr. Mundo does passively based on how many cards are in your trash, you actually have to recycle those, and she's going to get the point buff for that. But she is particularly strong, Vi, with Ride the Wind. Let's say you get her up to like 14, 15 power. You conquer a battlefield, you use 2 energy and 1 power for Ride the Wind, you move Vi to that other battlefield. That's a great way to close the game out, particularly because you can also use Ride the Wind in your opponent's turn to score surprise points as well. With Annie readying those 2 runes at the end of your turn, that is a very, very important line to be taking in this deck.
Yeah, Vi in many ways is the equivalent of Dr. Mundo when you're using the Ride of the Wind, right? Now, obviously, one of the challenges with her is like you determine her power, and you kind of lose it very, very quickly. And so like she seems to have like, she could potentially have a very, very high ceiling, but that floor drops pretty fast with Vi. So at the end of the day, it's one of those cards that I really like because it gives you a ton of extra flexibility. So I really like the design here, especially with the Ride the Wind. And in particular, exactly what you said with the Sneaky Deckhand. Do not underestimate how powerful something like a Flight or Flight is. Like that is one of my favorite cards in the game because it can be used offensively as well. Like I use it with Dr. Mundo, right? Bring it back to the battlefield, stuff like that, or bring it back to base and allow yourself to kind of reposition your board state, which I think is incredibly powerful. But also defensively as well. It's an incredibly powerful card. You also have Darius in here, which I think is fantastic. The Noxan Hopeful, which is a very good card who I think is I said Noxus. I don't know, man. I'm still learning the lore here. I really like the Legion effect here because you do have some relatively inexpensive cards, and you're more than likely to be able to get that Legion style effect. But at the end of the day, a very solid deck list here. I think that this is one that, Annie has been impressing in many different regards at competitive, Riftbound events. So it wouldn't surprise me that the budget-oriented version of the deck is also absolutely solid.
I think it's the best budget deck. Now, there is one card in this which the top meta refined lists are playing, and that's Kaiser. This legendary Kaiser, or the, trying to think of the rarity name. Is it Epic? I always get the rarity names confused. I shouldn't call it a legendary. But this Kaiser, 4 energy and 4 might, the red Kaiser. She's great. She's very, very good. Don't get me wrong. She has the accelerate ability when I conquer, draw 1. What's great about this card is she costs no power that you can just play her on turn 2. Like, obviously she's a great card, but she's like $60, $70 or something like that. And while she's good, she's not that good. She's just a very solid card. Obviously Kaiser, one of the most popular decks in the game, and that's really driven her price up. Like, if I'm looking at Thousand-Tailed Watcher and someone tells me that's a $30, $40 card, I say, yes, that is worth it. You need that card for your deck to function. It's a big win condition. the Kaiser here is so replaceable in this Annie deck, in my opinion. Of course it's good, but the cards that you're able to replace Kaiser with are also very, very good. There's a high density of good cards available to you in this red and purple aggro. So if you have one Kaiser, if you have two Kaiser, if you have three Kaiser, you can slot them in. But if you have no Kaiser, you can absolutely still play this game, and it will be incredibly strong. Incredibly, incredibly strong.
Yeah, I love the idea of having like different options for what cards you want to play. And like, again, if you pull Kaiser, absolutely play her, right? But I like the idea, again, focusing on the budget decks, of having opportunities to not only upgrade these decks, but perhaps find new synergies that like you can kind of maximize the potential of more budget oriented cards. And one thing that I've learned over years and years and years playing card games is sometimes very expensive cards suddenly become much cheaper when that meta shifts. And vice versa, cheap cards now turn into expensive cards later as they release new synergies down the line. So, don't get too fixated on the pricing right now. Build a deck, play the deck, master the deck, and then upgrade it as you can. Any closing thoughts on this Annie deck, which you have identified as probably one of your favorite?
Yeah, my big thing would say I would really recommend people try out Nocturne in this deck. I've spoken to a lot of good players about my list with Nocturne, and they said, yeah, I don't think so, mate. But for me, Nocturne is my favorite card. I think the high roll potential with this card is amazing, but people underestimate actually the maths. If you play a stacked deck, it's about a 23% chance to hit a Nocturne from it. Now, that might not sound like much, but it's kind of a lot, right? Like, if you think about it, when you're hitting a Nocturne off a stacked deck, you're paying 1 energy and 1 power to draw a card and play a 4 might ganking card onto a battlefield. And you can do that in your opponent's turn as well, because you can play stack deck during showdowns. And then suddenly there's a 4 might guy at a battlefield your opponent thinks they're about to take over. Even just as a sideboard card that you just only play with the Candlelit Sanctum, I believe it's called, the battlefield, that when you conquer, you look at the top 2. It's a great option. But Annie, also the chosen champion Annie, when you play her, you can bring a action card back from your discard and add it to hand. That means you can play 4 stacked decks in this. And as a aggro deck, a tempo deck, I think Nocturne is such a good addition. If I'm going second against Kaiser, I'm going to be very glad that I've got access to Nocturne in my sideboard or in my main deck.
I've been becoming a believer in Nocturne. The reason why is because in my Teemo deck, I've actually been trying to play a strategist edition of it. And with this, obviously it has the opportunity to potentially reveal Nocturne, right? And I'm still working on a list right now. I am playing the Scout, and that's fine. I think that's a good card too. But at the end of the day, I do really like Nocturne. I think it's one of the I don't want to say underappreciated cards. I think that like Nocturne, there's a big divide. People either completely believe in it or they think it's so overhyped, and nowhere in the middle. And I'm of the belief that Nocturne is actually a super powerful card that eventually is going to become very meta relevant. And maybe it's going to be because of you. Maybe because of right now, people are going to start cooking more with Nocturne, because I think the card is particularly powerful.
Yeah, I love it. I think also like one thing about Nocturne is people overestimate how much of a downside it is to actually draw this card. Like in Annie, for example, and probably also in Teemo, you're playing Traveling Merchant, so you might be able to discard it. And frankly, 4 energy and 1 power for a 4 might ganking card. Listen, it's not good, but it could be worse. It's not like it's going to lose you the game by playing it down. Of course, you want to cheat it out. But yeah, that's also, I think, one thing that's important with Nocturne is using your sideboard, using your battlefields. You don't have to have it in your deck for all 3 games. You could just have it when you have the Candlelit Sanctum. You could also just have it when you're going second in a tough matchup where that extra 4 might could be great. Like imagine an Annie mirror, Alex. You're playing Annie, I'm playing Annie, and I just suddenly get a Nocturne out for free, essentially. Like, I don't think you would be too happy about that in a mirror matchup. It's going to be a big, big difference maker when you can high roll.
And at the end of the day, I think that this deck is incredibly well designed. And we do have more. There's 2 more, in fact. Jinx, you did mention that if you want to still play that color combination of Rage and Chaos. Is it Fury and Chaos? It's Fury and Chaos. I don't know why I said Rage. But, Fury and Chaos, you do have the Jinx loose cannon deck here. Do you want to kind of walk us through here? And once again, Jinx was available as one of these starter decks. So if you're interested in kind of like getting started for the first time, you do have that particular option. This one running all Fury mana here, which is particularly interesting. I mean, it's it makes perfect sense here. You don't really need any. You don't have a purple power, so you don't really need it, right? Regardless, there's a couple interesting choices here. I was going to say, Twisted Fate is one of the cooks of this particular shell, and I love to see it. So why don't you talk us through this particular deck?
Yeah, so Twisted Fate is a very fascinating card, which is when it attacks, you look at the top rune from your deck, I believe it is, and based on what color it is, there's an ability. So Twisted Fate itself is a purple card, so you can only play it, you can play it with purple plus something. Now, you can't actually play purple with yellow currently in the game, so that's the stun an enemy unit effect isn't something you can do. You could play this in a Teemo deck of purple and blue, and then if you hit a blue rune, you draw 1. But in this deck, we play 12 red runes. So the top rune of your rune deck is always going to be red, which means that Twisted Fate in this deck reads, when I attack, deal 2 damage to an enemy unit here and 1 to all other enemy units here. So it's just really fun, very, very exciting. The deck's built around it. It's a deck that I absolutely love to play. Again, you could play the same version, like the Annie deck, which we just looked at. You could just swap out Annie for Jinx and play that deck, and it's going to be good. But I wanted to also give everyone like a deck that's a little bit more unique to Jinx, and the Twisted Fate Gambler is so much fun in a Jinx deck. It
is, and I've had the opportunity to play with Twisted Fate quite a bit, and I did try to make kind of different color combinations happen, of course, with the blue synergy there, and it is fun. Whether or not you're kind of like drawing a card or you're applying damage is solid in any given circumstance. But what I will say is I like the call to do the 12 Fury Energy here, because when I was doing it in a sealed event, I'm like, damn, I really need the extra energy, extra damage here. And sure enough, I'm drawing a card, right? And it's like, damn, that's not what I wanted. Drawing a card's still helpful here. So I do like the call to like design a Twisted Fate deck with solely one type of particular energy that you're looking to capitalize on. So you have a very consistent effect that you can rely on. This deck also features a couple cards that we've been talking about a lot, like Fight or Flight. But once again, we do have Vi in here as well, which is particularly interesting, and Jinx. Now, for the players that are relatively new, why don't you talk about how the Jinx champion unit can be used to the greatest effectiveness in this particular shell?
It's a great question, Alex, because a lot of the Jinx decks I've seen are actually only playing one copy of this Jinx Demolitionist, and it's just going to be their chosen champion. But I just can't get behind that, because I think this card is so powerful, but only really when combining it with the Legend. And also, if you play this card at the wrong time, I think you can lose the game on the spot. I think that the Jinx decks are deceptively difficult to play. So you really want to be playing if you've got a Jinx as your chosen champion and a Jinx in your hand, you really want to be playing the Jinx from your hand first, because ideally when you play Jinx Demolitionist, you want to discard as few cards as possible. So it really wants to be like one of the last cards you play from your hand, or you want to be discarding cards which have an effect when you discard them. For example, the Flame Chompers is like a big card which when you discard it, you can pay a red power to summon it down. So you can definitely lose the game if you're not careful with when you play your Jinx. Of course, the Jinx Legend is if you have one card or less in your hand, draw a card. So you need to plan out your turn, try and play this Jinx Champion card at a moment which is going to leave you with one or less cards in hand. So then you can start drawing afterwards. But it's so powerful when it comes in. It can come in ready, it can be very hungry on power, but it can be 6 might for 3 energy. We do see, Alex, a lot of the more refined Jinx decks playing the red seal, because of how power hungry this card can be. And obviously emptying your hand out becomes more easily done when you have a 0 cost card. But the seals are very, very expensive. So if you have 1 seal, 2 seal, I would slot them in. If you have all 3, go for it as well. You can still play Jinx on a budget, but I think that this is probably the card which you would want to invest in if you're sold on Jinx and you don't mind spending a little bit of money on it. I think 3 copies of Seal of Rage will help out quite a bit.
I found it particularly interesting that like kind of the ho-hum around Jinx at the start of the launch of Riftbound was like, oh, it's the worst of the starter decks. I don't think you should buy it. Like everyone's like, nah, don't play Jinx. It sucks. Play Viktor. No, like, listen, I get it. Victor's starter deck is actually pretty solid. But I bought the Jinx one. I was like, you know what? No, I'm playing Jinx. You're telling me it sucks. I'm ripping it. And sure enough, I did phenomenally in that opening tournament there. And it was so fun. And I felt it had a very consistent play pattern of, I like a little bit of top decky stuff. But you know what? I was very aggressive. I had the momentum rolling. I was making good use of the champion zone, which I think you were right to call that out. In this particular type of deck, that champion is a superpower. Because when you are out of options, that is something that provides you with the optionality you need to close out games. And obviously the loose cannon allows you to draw that extra card. But honestly, I think that this deck in particular is one that if you're looking to master a relatively inexpensive deck, I don't know if it gets much better than this Jinx deck. Like in terms of overall cost, this is definitely on the lower side. And you still have that Twisted Fate combination, which I think provides a lot of utility, a lot of fun. And honestly, the amount of times I've closed out kind of battlegrounds with Cleave, which opponents don't often anticipate. Well, they should be, but they don't often, especially as the game is new and people aren't too familiar with what, they're often focused on what their deck does. They often aren't considering like when I'm playing Teemo, they're like, I'm going to do this. I'm like, well, I got smoke screens, right? So it's able, I'm able to trade in a very effective way that they're not kind of anticipating. And I feel like Cleave does that as well.
Yeah, definitely. There's like a lot of the purple cards here you're going to be seeing in all the decks, right? All the budget decks. Stack Deck, Traveling Merchant, Fight or Flight Tide Turner, I think is like a really solid set of cards. One card I really wanted to give an honorable mention to, and I squeezed it in here, is the Maddened Marauder, because it is another card which can be a win condition. And if you're on a budget, I think it's a great card to have a look at in a lot of purple decks. This card is kind of like a hybrid between Tide Turner and Fight or Flight. It's 5 energy, 4 might with the tank ability, but the important part is the ability, when you play me, move a unit from a battlefield to its base. So you can use this in a similar way to Fight or Flight, like offensively or defensively. You could move one of your opponent's cards out into their base and then conquer. Or if you've got a big card like a Vi, Vi has ganking, so bad example. Let's say Jinx. You have Jinx at a battlefield that holds. She readies at the start of the turn. You could play the Maddened Marauder into the battlefield that she was at or at your base. She goes back to your base, and then Jinx can use her assault ability again and move in. It's a card which is like almost good enough when you've got these super optimized decks where money isn't a problem. You just throw money at the problem, you can probably improve upon it. But if you're working on a budget, I think this is such a good card. Even in like optimized decks, I could easily see myself playing one copy of this card. I do like it a lot. It's got a real place in my heart. It's a win condition on a budget, which is actually quite rare at the moment in Riftbound.
Yeah, any card that has like this tech feature to it where you could potentially use it for disruption or you could potentially use it offensively, I think is particularly powerful, which is exactly what this Maddened Marauder does. Now, with regards to this deck, again, you do have scrap heaps in the sideboard there, which works perfectly with the Traveling Merchant. You could consider kind of amping that up if you so desire. The Tide Turner is a really interesting one as well. I've been kind of mixed ho-hum on Tide Turner. Like in Mundo, I see it and I like it. With this here, obviously with the Vi, it definitely does double duty here and there. Very interesting choice there as well. You have the Darius. Overall, a very solid deck. And that is going to take us to our final deck of the day, which is the Budget Viktor deck. Now, you are shouting out, it looks like Willow here as well. And Willow is a phenomenal card gamer as well, so it's great to see Willow making an appearance on our first episode of Into the Rift. Joe, why don't you break us down this Viktor deck?
Yeah, Willow has been grinding Riftbound. He programmed the whole tabletop simulator program for Riftbound when it was only out in China, and like there was barely cards that had just been announced before it was even out in China. So huge shout out to Willow for all he's done for the community. I have a feeling he's going to be a little bit annoyed at me though, because he posted this Budget Viktor deck that he's been playing at locals. I was like, oh, that's exactly what I need, because this covers us for both yellow and blue, which we hadn't actually had up to that point. But I did make a few little tweaks and I haven't play tested it. So we'll make sure in the description to have the link to Willow's original list. The only thing I did was I took out a few of the top end cards to just play 3 copies of the Ravenbloom Student. I hate missing my first turn in this game so much. So there was only 6 2 energy cards before. I just put in 3 students. So I think I cut like 1 Riptide Rex, and I cut 2 Yordles as well. So not a big change, but I love the Ravenbloom Student. I just wanted that curve. This one is a little bit different to all the other budget decks we've looked at because it's actually quite a control heavy deck. Most of all the other budget decks really are quite aggressive, and that's the win condition. But this deck, you don't have the Thousand-Tailed Watcher in it, although if you have any copies, just slot them in accordingly, because that's the big blue finisher. But what this deck has is it does have access to a different finisher, which is the Grand Stratagem. This is a extremely power-hungry card, but it doesn't matter if it's power-hungry. If you play it and then you win the game that turn, the power cost is somewhat irrelevant. Give friendly units +5 might this turn. So of course with Viktor you're spawning lots of tokens. So this is a great alternative. If you don't have access to Thousand-Tailed Watcher, you can load up on Grand Stratagems. Maybe you even want to play 3 to be completely fair in this deck. And it's a great way of having a finisher without having to break the bank.
I have felt that Grand Stratagem has been easily one of the top cards in the set. Because I think what it does is it gives you an absolute win condition with this like zoo style gameplay, which I think is very consistent across like other games as well. In this case with Viktor and the amount of tokens you're able to generate, Grand Stratagem turns them into legit lane winners. Like you absolutely crush your opponent with it. And you're right. You don't play this assuming that like there's going to be a next turn. You close out the game with this. And the other thing about this is over time, especially if you're someone who's relatively new to Riftbound, like I was at locals and I'm playing against a Viktor player, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, I have my Mundo on board. Where am I going first? I'm like, well, I'm clearing out all these tokens. If they have tokens sitting in a battlefield, I'm wiping those out right away because I know the risk that Grand Stratagem kind of presents. At the same time, though, if you're against a highly skilled player, what they'll do is they'll actually retreat many of their tokens and units in preparation of Grand Stratagem, because then you can't actually directly target them via the battlefield attack, therefore allowing them to then play Grand Stratagem and then move into the battlefields and wipe you out completely, taking over the 2 battlefields at the same time, potentially closing out the game. So I do think that the macro management perspective of Grand Stratagem is really fascinating. I think it's a really fun way of playing Riftbound. And in particular, I think you're right to identify that this type of budget deck is one that a lot of people can get behind. This is the type of deck that you can absolutely beat more refined, more expensive decks with, because it simply goes wide, and then all of a sudden it goes tall too, and it's able to run over your opponent.
Yeah, absolutely. And this version of Viktor, you can build Viktor in many different ways. It's one of the most flexible legends really in the game. Lux is of course the Proving Grounds legend, which is the same color combination, but Viktor kind of just does everything Lux can do, but a little bit better. You can be the better aggressive deck, you can be the better control deck, and kind of seemingly everywhere in between, like whatever you want Viktor to do. So on the sideboard, I put a bunch of the different cards that you might want to take a look at to give you a different direction. Like the yellow seal, the seal of unity, is probably the most competitive way to play this deck, where you just load up on lots of yellow power costs. But I think that there's also a very interesting blue Viktor. We see the yellow Viktor as the champion here, but the blue Viktor is also quite good, and you could maybe go a completely different direction with this deck if you so wanted. But this one is just got lots of big control cards. Like it's almost like a Lux deck, but you've got your Viktor legend instead. You've got Singularity, 3 copies of that is one of the most powerful cards in the game. Deal 6 to 2 different units at once. Riptide Rex, a very similar card. He has a 6 might body, but you deal 6 to 1 unit at a battlefield. The fact that Singularity can target things at the base, particularly important. So if you like a little bit of a slower deck, a little bit more control heavy, and you're on a budget, I think that this is the one for you. And then you've got the flexibility to go so many different directions with this one legend and one color pairing. I think it's a really fun one to get started with on Riftbound.
I absolutely love the amount of removal you have in this deck. Like really,
it's absurd.
Right? Like it's absurd. And even Call the Weak, which is absolutely fantastic for players who are looking on a budget to be able to trade effectively. I mean, this is one of those things where you're putting a bunch of tokens on the field to play, and if I put a Mundo out, that's my only card. Well, he's cooked. You know what I mean? And so I think there's a lot of advantages you can kind of eke out with this particular deck, which makes it incredibly powerful. And I know you said you like the Annie one, but I got to tell you, I think this one is incredibly competitive. And if you're on a budget and you want to go to locals or you want to try to make a splash competitively on a budget, I wouldn't be surprised if this one would be the one to take. You know what I mean? I just love the design. I love how it's like super aggro at the same time. Singularity, as you said, being able to target at the base. Right, I just finished talking about how retreating to base and setting up your next turn is so important. Singularity just says like, no. Those guys are gone. You know what I mean? So it does give you a lot of optionality from that standpoint. Again, as a blue player, I do like the Stupefy as well. And Hidden Blade, again, you got a lot of removal there. But at the end of the day, a solid list here. Joe, did you want to take us through any final thoughts on this particular shell?
No, I think like you can have a lot of fun with it, and you can definitely try Viktor in some different ways. So big shout out to Willow. We'll link his like tweet in the description so you can check out his Twitter page where he posted it and see more of his thoughts on it as well.
Awesome. And with that being said, again, we will have the links to all the decks down in the description below so you guys can kind of get access to them outside of this pod. But what I will say as well is that in future episodes, we will have a segment dedicated to a mailbag. So if you have a question or a topic of conversation you'd like for us to tackle, simply comment down below. And we're going to take a look at those every single week and use them as topics of conversation. And we just might be able to feature yours on a future episode of Into the Rift. With that being said, guys, we'd like to say thank you so much for joining both Joe and I here on the first inaugural episode of Into the Rift. We are only just getting started in the world of Riftbound. We're only just getting started with this podcast. And as I mentioned before, your support would be genuinely appreciated if you're willing to share it to your friends who are into Riftbound as well. We are only just beginning on our journey here together. Joe, any closing words on our first episode of this podcast?
No, it's just been a pleasure, Alex, to join you on this. It's been a lot of fun and looking forward to the next. I'll say as well, if anyone wants to submit a deck building challenge, right? Like let's say they're like, oh, I really want a good Garen deck or Leona deck or something, like let us know. And maybe we can even see if we can cook up some unorthodox decks for you guys too.
And one thing I will mention as well is, Joe has been streaming Riftbound a lot. And it's kind of hard to create tabletop content on the internet, like actual gameplay, but you seem to have gotten it figured out. And so I'm going to be linking Joe's stream down below as well, where, even just yesterday you played a whole bunch with your girlfriend, which was a lot of fun. I was kind of idly watching by there. Well, I was supposed to be working, but, there you go. That's what I was doing instead. Love Riftbound, and I'm so glad that you guys are here on this journey with us. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.